Is it justifiable to torture terrorists in times of crisis? This presentation aims to answer the sole question surrounding the aspect of torture and if it is in fact justifiable in times of crisis. There has been a long history of torture in the main democracies, and since the Second World War, rigorous bodies and institutions such as the Geneva Conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the UN Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment have been implemented, going against all forms of torture and aligning with the world's view surrounding human rights. The United Nations 1948 states no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. Further stating, every act of torture within the meaning of the Convention is illegal under existing federal and state law, and any individual who commits such act is subject to penal sanctions as specified in the criminal statutes. Such prosecutions do in fact occur in appropriate circumstances, and torture cannot be justified by exceptional circumstances, nor can it be excused on the basis of an order from a superior officer. All bodies and institutions created after the Second World War have the sole aim to prevent inhumane methods of torture occurring to any human being. Since the 9/11 attacks, the War on Terror has provided justification for many countries, most notably the US, to engage in torture techniques. In the days following the 9/11 attacks, the Bush administration received authority to use the military force necessary against states complicit in the attacks or those sheltering those who had planned them. This meant that the US could use all necessary and appropriate force against those nations, organizations, or persons that were determined, planned, authorized, committed, or aided the terrorist attacks that occurred on September 11th. Barnes 2015 states, the absolute prohibition against torture is a just Kogan's international norm that is observed widely under the international human rights and humanitarian law. Yet, revelations that the Bush administration employed waterboarding, stress positions, well standing, and exposure to loud music during interrogations in the War on Terror have raised questions over the robustness of the torture taboo in world politics. With this being the precedent set throughout the world, the need to examine what exactly constitutes as a definitive definition of torture is essential. Following the US's disruption in the acts of humanity, the Bush administration still refused to admit to torturing their prisoners or suspects, refusing to endorse torture or challenge the absolute prohibition against torture because it knew it was illegitimate behavior and therefore could not be done or spoken about. This reinforces the statutes and ideals surrounding torture because the US could go to war and declare the right to kill terrorist group leaders, but could not justify torturing them. Instead, their definitive of torture was different to that of the bodies and institutions serving all human rights. The US has a very narrow definition of torture, defining it as an act committed to specifically aim to produce severe physical or mental pain. Severe referring to pain and suffering on a level that would be associated in a serious physical condition or injury, such as death, organ failure, or serious impairment of bodily functions. Through the use of the word severe, the US denied torturing their military combatants. So why is torture justified in some circumstances? The justification for the torturing of terrorists comes from the ticking time bomb scenario. Imagine that a terrorist has planted a bomb in Metropolis, which is going to detonate in the near future and kill thousands of innocent people, or make it millions if you think the stakes need to be higher than that. Further, imagine that we manage to capture the terrorist, that they refuse to reveal the location of the bomb, and that it's too late to evacuate. Would it be morally right to torture the terrorist to elicit the relevant information that would enable us to defuse and find the bomb? New suggests this liberal justification for torture is based on unexamined liberalism that engages in various reductions, reducing the violence of interrogational torture to just torture itself, and secondly, reducing moral agencies to more reactiveness, shrinking our moral horizon to how we react in situation of forced choice. The choice is forced upon us in a manner in which you have to go along with torture, assuming that it will save millions of lives, taking the justification of the violence to a high means of assertiveness. Thirdly, it reproduces perspective by fabricating where evil others are seen to keep turning up, seemingly out of nowhere. The justification of the scenario from a liberal standpoint is similar to the definition of torture itself. Violence is used to prevent more violence on an ever seemingly larger scale. The use of torture is implemented because of the view so many had after the large-scale terrorist attacks of 9/11. Radical terrorists will take advantage of our fussy legality, so we have to suspend them to beat them. The use of torture is used to prevent attacks of this manner, but the aspect is ignored that many may not be able to even provide the information to prevent the attack. A specific planned attack is known to exist. These are all assumptions that the ticking time bomb scenario makes. The attack will happen within a very short time, i.e. is imminent. The attack will kill a large number of people. The person in custody is the perpetrator of the attack. The person has information that will prevent these attacks. Torturing the person will obtain the information in time to prevent the attack. No other means exist that might get the information in time. No other action could be taken to avoid the harm. The motive of the torturer is to get information and save lives, and nothing more. It is an isolated situation, not often repeated. These are all the reasons assumed in the torturing of terrorists. A series of torture techniques that have been used since the 9/11 attacks and have been part of the Great War on Terror are known as enhanced interrogation techniques. The US's very narrow definition on torture, as outlined previously, produces the techniques you see here, ranging from stress positions to beating. The severe implications of torture are not met with the US's definitive, and the techniques continue to be used despite the disagreement from the UN and such conventions. The justifications that are in place for the torture of terrorists is not a justifiable reason to assert such practices. Why and how is understood, but the ratifications of the matter does not eliminate the aspect that violence is used to prevent violence. Liberal justifications for torture are flawed, and torture goes against the agreed and signed treaties and conventions set out to preserve all human rights. Therefore, to conclude,